cheese. Where's my... There we go. Awesome. Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing great. My name is Sabramowicz and I help learning experience designers and instructional designers create the kinds of e-learning experiences that they can actually be proud of. And thanks so much for stopping by. Today I thought I would use a fun background. So let me know if you can see all the fruit salad that's going on in this live. Yes, so today I have a great question from somebody who is who's sent me this question as a result on something that I asked on LinkedIn, and I thought I would share it with you. I actually have two little questions that I thought I'd address with you today. By the way, if you're watching and you can see my fruit salad background, can you give me at least a thumbs up that you can see it and you can hear me okay? Yeah, let me know, because I have no idea if I'm the only one seeing this. All right. And it's fun, isn't it? All right, so here's a question. How do you capture the impact of interactive storytelling? What forms of data do stakeholders, what kind of data do stakeholders find valuable? Thank you so much, Gosha. I can see my fruit bonanza. I love it. Okay, Raymond, thanks so much for joining. Awesome. This is fun, isn't it? Why not? Okay, so it's kind of interesting because I don't know if this happens to you guys, but whenever we're trying to like launch a new initiative or trying to sell our stakeholders, which could be just basically your boss and your peers, on using like a new strategy, especially if the strategy is like using storytelling in your learning or integrating scenarios, a lot of times people are like, well, how are we going to prove that this is effective? How are we going to prove that this, investing our time and spending more time, as is assumed, on designing great learning is going to pay us? Like, what's the return on investment, or how can we gather that data, right? So data is pretty huge. Hi, David. So one of the things that I was thinking about was that really, and this is the truth, you can't really say that there's, like, let's say if you see somebody who's really successful, right? You can't say that it was like one thing that made that person successful, like, oh yeah, they were born in the right neighborhood, right? Because you could say, well, there's tons of other people who were born in that neighborhood, like let's say Jeff Bezos, and not everybody from that neighborhood is Jeff Bezos, right? So basically what we're saying is that it isn't a single incident that contributes to somebody's success. It is a whole bunch of things that prop that person up, give them the aha moments they need. There's a bit of luck in there. There's a bit of other things. And then what happens is that person's success is really a combination of a lot of these factors. And so it's kind of funny because when we get into the learning world, we try and like connect the things that we're doing to a specific, like we're like, if we implement this kind of e-learning, then we're going to see retention rise by 25%. And to be real, that's actually like, there's no way that nothing works in a vacuum like that, right? So there's companies who are saying, we want to improve our training because we want to increase retention by 25%. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's a great goal. But then you can't say that all of your eggs are in that one basket. You can't say, hey, if this fails, then that means that our retention will go down by 25%, because it doesn't work like that, right? Like, it's an ecosystem of things. It's almost like, to lose weight, you can't just work out 24 hours and eat like crap, because and not sleep, right? It's a combination of things that brings you to your successful outcome, right? See you later, definitely. Thanks for stopping by. So what I was thinking is, how do you sell really something to a stakeholder, your boss, whoever's you're working with? How do you sell this kind of different approach and then realistically are very honest about the kind of data that you can produce for them, right? And And one of the things that I realized after a discussion with my partner Ryan is that there really isn't a, like you're being disingenuous if you say, yeah, it'll increase this by 4%. Like that's just not real, right? That's not the truth. And so what is it that that person that you're trying to persuade and convince that this is the best approach, that it will stack the odds in your favor in essence? What do they need to believe that will help them make the decision to the positive and actually say, okay, you know what, this scenario thing sounds good. What is it that they need to believe? And I think it's some of the things that we believe as storytellers, as scenario designers. And here's my pitch for you that I want you to use the next time you're getting resistance about, you know, why should we use scenarios? Why is this worth our time and investment, and your time and your investment, right? So here's the thing. Now let's say, I don't know if whoever's watching, if you ever watch documentaries about famous people or people who are influential. If you do, give me a thumbs up or some kind of face, anything, right? Let me know. So if you ever watch documentaries about those people, there's a reason why we watch those things. They're usually inspirational. They inspire us. They're like, usually it's like the story of somebody coming up from, you know, nowhere, and then they become somebody great, or you just learn about their struggle. And one of the things that the reason we love documentaries so much about people and biographies is because what happens is we actually get to see, it's kind of neat, we are actually interested in seeing the person's journey. Because a lot of times what happens is when we see a famous person or something like that, what will happen is we'll only be able to see the final outcome, but we're really interested in how they got there. And there's a reason why we are interested in why they got there. It's because we want to see if we can also get there, right? Or we want to be inspired by this story, the challenges that they overcame. That's very, very important. So I would say, do people believe in those things? Yes. Do people watch biographies and documentaries? Heck yes, right? Those are things that resonate. Those stories resonate with people. Now, here's what's magical. When you watch documentaries and biographies, you're watching them only about famous people, right? And think about this now. What if you could go to the people who work at your company, the people who are the best of the best, who have been there and have really proven themselves, really, if I could say, optimize the job and are really performing at a top level. And they're almost, as you can say, they're like the superstars in your company. They're the heroes in your workplace. Like when somebody says, you know, who's the best around here? Who do I want to be one day? They can point to that person. Be like, I want to be like John. John is kicking it. But I love it. Look at him. You know, if I could just do the things that he does, because he looks so, you know, customers love him. People, he's a great team player. You know, what is that person doing? And so one of the things you can do, and this is something that is just unheard of and untapped resource as far as I'm concerned. So I'm giving you some special info here, okay? So don't keep it secret though, okay? I really don't want you to keep it secret. So basically what you can do is you can take those stories that are innate to a company and the heroes that are innate to a company and take their journey instead of people always looking at the final product. Now you can say, hey, let's figure out how they got there by creating an awesome scenario about their journeys and their challenges. And then what happens is the people, what's really cool is that person is so much closer than you. Like, you know, you're not watching the biography of Churchill, who's kind of like far, far away from you and most people's aspirations, right? But if I'm learning about the guy who's like 3 or 4 years ahead of me and he's really kicking butt and he's got, let's say, top sales or a really great customer rapport and he's killing it, I want to be like that person. Guess what? Your story is even going to resonate even more with more people because it's like, it's closer. It's almost like something that they can do. And that's one of the things that really inspired me about Stan Lee. I didn't know that Stan Lee, the guy who, I don't know if you guys know who Stan Lee is. I hope you do, because he's kind of like a personal hero of mine. You know, comic books, Avengers, all those people. He's an instructional designer. And I was like, what? This is amazing. The guy's like focused on learning. And what's really cool is that the idea of comic books and the idea of storytelling is something that he's always been involved with. And even the idea of sharing knowledge through comics and stories has always been kind of like the thing that he's done. And the thing that other places that are very serious, like the military, have used for ages to share their lessons and their stories. So I'm always like inspired by Stan, right? So I loved learning about Stan, his story, his challenges. I watched everything on Stan. So those are the things that would happen as you become almost closer as a target learner to the person that you want to aspire to be. So we already do that with biographies and documentaries, right? Because we are intrigued by people's stories of success. Now, and those people aren't really ever close to us, so maybe. But imagine now creating stories and capturing stories of successes that are teaching people, that are parables almost. But now you're doing that closer to home and giving them the message almost that you can do this. You can do this for you. Isn't that cool, right? So that's one of the things I want you to think about, is that if somebody is, hello, thanks for stopping by. If somebody is doubting whether story or storytelling is the next level as far as hacking how people learn and how people retain, all you have to do is go back to that idea that we are already drawn to people's stories of success. They inspire us, they teach us things. Now, all you're doing with your interactive story is you're capturing the stories and the successes that are closer to that person's own achievement. So you're capturing the stories from the workplace that are already success stories, right? Or you're crafting a really well-designed success story, even if somebody isn't having that success yet. So anyways, I hope that was helpful. But basically what I'm trying to do is say that if you really want to sell people who you're working with on stories, you have to start, instead of saying, I'm going to plow through and kind of keep on sharing this stuff without really realizing that first you have to, every time you share a new idea with people who are resistant to it, or just people, period. They don't even have to be resistant to it. They're just going to be people. Anytime you share an idea, people are going to say no, because it's just protection. It really is. Especially if it's a new idea, so new to them, they're going to be afraid to look silly. A lot of times we pitch them stuff and you want to use new ideas, but people don't actually know what that means. Like, and I know that there's a lot of times I even do that, right? Where I'll be talking about stuff and people will be like, what do you mean by that? Like, even when you say e-learning, that can be so many different things to different people, right? So when you go to your stakeholders and you say, hey, can you, let's try and do this strategies. Look at this thing. It's so cool. We can do this at our company. It's actually really hard for them to imagine even a process. So the first reaction is going to be like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, no, right? So what you have to do is you have to meet them where they are. And where are they? Everybody in the world loves stories, even if they tell you that they don't. That's like saying, I have this friend and he would, whenever he'd meet he was in his searching for a girlfriend phase, and he would go on those sites that had like the profiles of people, and he's like, oh, she's a perfect match because she likes movies. And I'm like, dude, that's every person in the world likes movies. You just have to pick the genre, right? So it's not really a qualifier as far as I'm concerned. So anyways, so the thing is that the people you're talking to, they love stories. They love movies. There's a reason why. So you have to start digging a little bit further, go back and say, here's why this will work, because it already works for you. So start off with that. Don't start with the solution and say, we got to use this because it's awesome. Dig first. Now there's the other thing that I talked about briefly earlier, is that people want hard data on things that are kind of intangible, and it basically makes you focus on things that aren't really reasonable or that actually really, as far as I'm concerned, matter. Because one of the things is you could say, okay, and I'm going to give you an example here that might not be as awesome as it should be. Okay, so bear with me. So let's say, I'm going to go back to the weight example because it's just so easy, right? So let's say you are trying to lose weight, and like we talked about the fact that, you know, to get fit, you got to do like all kinds of things. Like you got to go to sleep on, you got to get enough sleep, you got to not drink crazy amounts of pop, and maybe go out for a walk once in a while, and maybe eat good food, right? All that kind of stuff. But let's say, and that contributes over time, right? That contributes to a healthy demeanor and body and all that jazz. But let's say, now the way we're saying, how do you measure that? How do you measure these things, right? You could say that the only thing you did is measure the calories you put in your body. And that's the only thing you measure, and you can say, well, is that going to be a valid representation, right, of the success I will have in achieving my goal? Probably not. So I was talking to somebody, I think it was just yesterday, and they were saying, how do I justify that? It's kind of funny, that question came up on LinkedIn, and then I had this conversation during one of my strategy sessions that I run for my students. And they said, well, how do I prove to somebody that my learning is having an impact, right? What do we measure? And I said, well, here's some things you could measure, but really you're not looking for these direct kind of measurement pieces. Here's something you can measure. How many, like let's say you're designing a scenario and somebody has to make a whole bunch of decisions. What you could measure is if they could, and you probably could come up with your own ideas right now. So if you have some ideas about what you could measure in an e-learning scenario, e-learning module basically, pop them into the messenger so I can see them. But let's say one thing you could measure is, and this is quite important to some places, is that if somebody starts a learning module online, that they finish it in a single sitting. They don't go a minute here, then they go away, then 3 minutes here and they go away. Like their goal is to improve. Hi, Jody. Their goal is to improve the propensity of somebody starting that module and finishing it. So storytelling, hello. And so one of the goals is that you have somebody who joins. Greetings from Tunisia. Well, hello and thank you for joining so much. That's awesome. So one of the things that happens is you can focus your training measurement on things like that. Like, did somebody start and finish in a single sitting? Or did somebody have a whole bunch of questions answered in a certain sequence, as in the scoring that they got was better than if they than the first time they went through, or if they went through multiple times. Or one of the things is, you know, if you have a whole, let's say 100 people go through your training and all of them pick the wrong or the worst option in a scenario on the first or couple of questions, then you could say, it seems like a lot of people are struggling with this. Maybe we should create more opportunities for them to practice this kind of decision, because this is the one that they seem to be messing up quite a bit on, right? So you could gather that kind of data, and that data is definitely valuable, right? But that's first order consequences. Those are like the initial, almost like the gratification stuff that you get from launching something, saying, hey, 500 people completed it, boom, that's a win. But what you're looking for, and that may, I gotta tell you that for some people who are not really thinking about training in the right way and where it fits in the ecosystem of somebody's success, might say that's enough that's enough metrics for you to convince them to go ahead with it, because now all of a sudden they're getting metrics that they're interested in. Maybe what they are interested in is the fact that somebody starts and finishes in a single sitting, because they're really looking at the time away from work or whatever, or completion rates are low, whatever. So that's an okay metric. But that's, like I said, that's instant gratification, and that's almost instant gratification for the training department or the LMS people who are tracking data, right? That is a first order consequence. Now we're looking for second and third order consequences of that training implementation. And it's not going to be like crystal clear like this. It's going to be a confluence of a whole bunch of things that are working together to prop up the successes. So remember how I said, using that weight loss example, how for you to actually get healthy, you can't just be like crappy in all areas of your life but eating healthy. Like if you're not sleeping and you're not walking, you're probably not going to be a healthy person, right? So what you're doing with your learning intervention is you're also looking at it in like this, how stacking odds. So one thing is, maybe your scenario, the first thing it does is it helps somebody realize they have a gap. Cool. All right, that's just one part of that like learning journey, right? The learning ecosystem. Well, then you have to think about, okay, we have this one piece. I'm going to do fingers because it's easier. I'm going to take this one piece, okay? That's almost like a single pillar, right? But we need to support them with 5 pillars. What are the 5 pillars? So maybe the one piece is that they now completed a piece of learning or a scenario piece that helps them identify that they have a gap. And now we need to support them with some really awesome info. Boom, that's your second pillar. And then maybe we have to help them apply. So maybe we have a coach in place that helps them. So what you're doing is, it's not like one thing to rule them all, and if this one thing fails, all the others are non-existent. But basically what you're doing is every time you're just adding to this piece, right? You're adding propensity. And if you can sell somebody on storytelling, what it does is it complements what's already happening and what's already being done well. And that's how I usually see scenarios. And when I implement them, I'm always thinking, how can I already augment what's happening at an organization? What do they have in place already? Because a lot of places already have coaching and mentorship, and you just need to have people discover, or great info. And they just need something like some kind of a catalyst to push people towards accessing those resources, because they don't even know maybe they're there, or they don't even realize they need that help, right? So those are some of the things that I think a great story can do, is just get somebody from that point of, I think I know everything, I don't need to take any action, to this area of to motivate them, help them discover things that they didn't know about themselves, and also to inspire them, because I think that a lot of people are just uninspired. They're uninspired and they're unmotivated, and they feel like they should just get another job or something because they're not getting what they need from this one. Well, really, maybe the resources are already there. And actually, one of the hardest things is to get a new employee, right? It's better to just take an employee who's already kind of there, knowing, and just needs a little bit of that boost to take them to the next level, right? So I hope that answers that particular question. And I hope that was useful to you with my fruit salad. I'm just really looking forward to seeing how this is going to look like when it actually posts. What else? Oh yeah, okay, so I think the other question was, it was about, what was it? It just flew out of my head. Now, if you have any questions about what I just talked about while I'm coming up with my own, oh yes, I just thought of it, then do post it, because then I'll be able to answer it. And I love it when you are here and interacting with me, because it makes me feel like I'm not just talking to myself. So the other question that came up, and it's actually one of my favorites, is the question about learning outcomes, right? How do we list learning outcomes so they mean something to people? So a lot of times what happens is we start our learning modules with, by the end of this module, you will be able to define this phrase, identify all the areas where this phrase applies. Like it's, it's basically, as far as I'm concerned, the learning outcomes or objectives, whatever you want to call them, semantics as far as I'm concerned. Because I don't care about that stuff. I really don't. Because in the grand scheme of things, about what is important is whether that page is there. Like, I've never seen, to be honest with you, a learning module be improved or diminished if the learning outcomes weren't at the very beginning. It's almost like one of those things, like, when they say, there's a quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but the quote is, something is not when something is perfect, not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And I always think about, if I took this out, would this, hi Kara, if I took the learning outcomes page out of that module, would it make any difference to the learning? I know, right, Kara? I turned this on and I was like, I'm going to try this filter with the fruit party. Glad you can see it. Glad I'm not the only one who can see all the fruit. So, and it's funny because people still, speaking of the learning outcomes, objectives, whatever people want to call them, I really don't care about that stuff. If I think about what the purpose of that is, it really is for me as an instructional designer, learning experience designer, whatever your name is out there, for you to have almost a checklist of what you want to accomplish with that. But a lot of times that's in our own technobabble speak, that it means nothing to the learner. Like, it really is a checklist for me to see if I've designed enough opportunities for this person to practice doing that. So, and I will answer that question, Kara. So one of the things that I'm proposing is that instead of you saying there must be learning objectives at the very beginning, one, you think about the context of when you're using them first. Are they helpful, or do they mean nothing? Because then it's extra reading that somebody has to do that means nothing. Are they phrased in a way that inspire the learner to actually accomplish them? Like, for me, define this term or identify this thing means nothing. What I like is to have those things in terms of a challenge for me. Like, see if at the end, by the end, you're able to do this. You know, help this person discover all the situations where they can be a leader. Like, isn't that way better than identify leadership principles? List all the principles of, like, it's just like, bleh, right? So what you really want to do is, how can you make it powerful for that person to be inspired to want to do that? That's what you want to do. So that's what learning objectives are. You can't take it straight up out of our instructional design books and then plop it in and have somebody be like, oh, that totally resonates with me. It doesn't. Turn it into a story, and also turn it into a transformation, right? What am I at the beginning? What am I at the end? Is there a difference? And that's what your learning objectives are, or outcomes. At the end, they're supposed to be different somehow. Well, make it personal. And that, to me, is how you should be moving around, moving about with those learning objectives. I'm sure there are places that they are, in some cases, maybe necessary, especially with more academic courses, because in fact, I think in some ways, in those academic courses, those things can almost be like skill sets that somebody can actually leverage on their resume. Like, why not, right? If they can, they're like, I took this course and here's some of the professional skills that I developed as a result, as long as it's honest, right? And that gives them some language that they can then use and borrow and say, look at all the things. So you're actually helping them. You're thinking, if you're going to add that stuff, how are you going to make it helpful to them? How are they going to use this? Is it going to be an inventory of the skills that they feel they've now gained and now they can share with others? Maybe. And that's when you look at courses that are, especially professional development courses, a lot of that stuff is things that you're like, oh, I'm going to add that to my resume, because now you gain that, right? So there's another way that you could position that. And Gosha, that's totally not how I use learning outcomes. I always look at what I would like to know after this training if I was a noob, something that would motivate me to go through the training. Yes, definitely, but you have to put it in their language. And so when you're a newbie, one of the things, like, do you really care about being able to define a term? Unless you do that professionally for a living, you don't care. So a lot of times when we say make an active learning verb at the very beginning, it really means nothing to that person. So if I'm a noob, all I gotta do is go, let's talk to a noob, right? And say, what resonates with you? What means something to you? What would make this a provocative experience? So definitely I agree with you on that there. You want to think about what makes it meaningful to them and what would motivate them. But a lot of times people just go straight to listing a bunch of objectives that are really for us and not for the noob. So I think we're on the same page, but I'm saying make it a story. Make it a challenge. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to Kara's question here. How do you feel about forced navigation tutorials? Okay, so I think, and it depends on where you're at as a learner. Forcing somebody to go through that stuff is, to me, I feel like it's insulting to my intelligence. Give me an option, right? Like there's, and I always pull from games, and my favorite games are iPad games. I don't know if you guys have ever played those hidden object games, which for a while I spent way too much money on. Oh my God. So hidden object games, right? And so what happens, have any of you ever played hidden object games on your iPad? It's basically a story, but you go from room to room and you try and like put things together to create like something that you need for the next scene. So the best ones do that. Or you walk into a room and it's full of junk and you have to find things. It's pretty funny. Yes, I love playing them. I had to like cut myself off so I'm not like totally addicted to that stuff. Now I'm just into the stories. So anyways, so one of the things they have in there is tutorials. They always have tutorials, and the best games have, to me, depends on what you're like. You choose your, basically as you enter that domain, you can choose with your beginner, intermediate, or expert. Because if you've done one, you've probably done the UI for them all. But then the other piece is that some of them do this kind of intuitively, and you've probably seen this, Kara, where you'll be in a place and they'll let you start, and then they'll have a pop-up saying hint, or next time do this. Sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't, but what I like it is when it's kind of built into your first experience as you are moving through that experience and as things get more complex. Or if I click on something that isn't intuitively efficient, then it pops up. And a lot of times, like now, all of our apps are built in with this like tips and tutorials. They pop up as you go. They assume you know. They assume that you want this pop-up, and then you can just dismiss. You can actually have a choice to dismiss all tutorials, but it doesn't force you to go through it. So it's almost like, I think that approach is actually better, because a lot of times people like to rush and they'll just say no to a tutorial, right? Without actually realizing that they need that help. So sometimes what's actually better is to assume that everybody doesn't know what they need, but not force them through the tutorial. Introduce these little UI pieces throughout, right? Like swiping. Or the other thing I've seen, which is super awesome and very intuitive, is, well, first you have to have a really solid UI design, because you could say, hey, if my interface is really nice and simple and clean and user-centered, if you have to take too much time to explain it, that means that something's wrong, right? It should be super easy. So, like I've seen games where the interface is like 2 buttons, do this or do that, and then they actually just have like 2 pictures. To choose, you do this, and then to get out of here, you do this. And it's a combination of things, right? If you have to, that's one of the things that's come up a lot in like organizations, like, let's do a scavenger hunt on our procedures website. And I'm like, if people need a scavenger hunt to find things, to learn how to find things on your procedure site, that means that your procedure site architecture is not set up to support the user well, because people shouldn't have to learn how to use a search engine, right? It's just type and search. So things need to be optimized on both ends, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if that answers your question, but that was my mini rant, okay? All right. Yes. Okay. So, oh wait. Yes. Okay. You said you had hot button. I don't even know what you meant by hot button. I didn't see that while you were saying it. All right. Oh, you were saying this. If you were saying love them in relationship to the hidden object games, then we are on the same page, my friend. And maybe one day we should hang out for coffee and buy some games. All right. So I hope you have a fabulous rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining this particular fruit party. I had so much fun. This totally changes everything. Now I just feel like my background is so much more fun. Also, I really appreciate the questions and the engagement. Really provocative and made me think. I love being challenged, and I love different perspectives. This is great. Although I definitely fall back on what I know best, which is testing with the end user. As much as we think we know who our target audience is, what they like, what they do, the best thing is to create something, test it with them, see the feedback, get it back, and then adjust, right? These are the things that we have to do more of, which is listen to our audience, listen to our learners, and see what resonates with them, and just be okay to kill your darlings and say, I've been doing this way, and I need to adjust it. And it will change from target learner to target learner, right? So you have to constantly keep on refining and listening. So I hope that that you take me up on at least that advice. All right. So if this is something you want to dig in deeper about, and you wanted to join me for our next workshop that we're running on creating your own interactive learning experiences, then definitely I'll put a link underneath the video to join my strategy session, which is free. Don't worry, it's free. But basically in that strategy session, we talk about your goals, what you're really trying to accomplish, where you're at right now, because I need to then say, hey, is this something that I can actually help you with? Because I only want to work with people I can help. Imagine that. And then if it's a good fit, then maybe you can join us in May. For our cohort. Basically, what we're doing in there is we're taking you from the beginning of your project, planning, and really, those business questions that you have about how am I going to prove value, those things. We really dig deep into that because you have to have a solid foundation to be able to move into a solid story. And one of the things that you'll find is there's a lot of people out there who are super savvy with technology. So savvy, in fact, that I can't even compare. But there's only so much you can do with tech if you don't have frameworks and systems to capture the kinds of experiences that the tech makes shine. So that's what I'm helping you focus on, is that strategy in the very beginning, so that you can, if you want, there's people who I'm working with that will be like, I just want to get to the storyboard stage and have that solid so I can just hand it off because I hate the tech. I don't want to build that. And I'm like, that's cool. There's so many people out there who can build stuff for you, right? But if you're already at the tech end, and I've got people who are like, yeah, I'm doing, motion picture VR stuff. And I'm like, that's awesome. Now let's add some jazz into that, right? With some compelling contextual stories. Woo! That'll be fun. Now that'll be the next level. But I can't just, I really need to figure out where you're at to see if I can actually help you. Because there's people who are like, will you teach me instructional design? I'm like, this isn't what we're doing. So no. So book that call. Let's chat, see where you're at. I'd even just love to figure out what your goals are see if I can help you. Now, Gosha, I thought talking to noobs was a given. Thank you, Anna. See you next time. Gosha, you're a sweetheart. Talking to noobs, you know what's crazy? Talking to noobs is a given, but a lot of people that actually reach out to me, which is kind of funny, they think that they're the noob. So they never actually test their learning with their target audiences. They will develop everything in isolation. Some of them even don't ever want to talk to an expert or even a case study to research any of that stuff. And they'll launch things that don't speak the language of the target learner, have never been tested on them, don't resonate, the stories don't resonate, the situations aren't real. So it's cool there's probably a reason you're here, because we're on the same wavelength. There's a lot of people who are just afraid to ask for those things which are like essential, right? Thank you for saying that. So glad you were here. Thanks for stopping by, and totally appreciated your questions and the interaction, because it was awesome and made me think, like I said. And I hope you have a fabulous rest of the day, my friends. Ciao, ciao.